But it's keeping on going. That's the thing. It's not just that one day. So
true.
we really get to practice how to get stuck in traffic in the rain.
I was gonna say that's Algiers for you. The traffic.
Yes.
That also been a big issue.
Yes. And I know rain also, I don't know how, but it's true. Rain makes internet just all the more challenging. So I'm glad that people have been able to connect, to join. I think it looks like we'll give maybe another few minutes just to see if people are coming in. Right, Hamza? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I'm getting notifications on email, so I think we have people trying to join.
Okay. Well, as you do that, I'll save introductions for a little bit, but I'll just kind of redo the overview. So today is a nice introductory session to what we hope will be a series of webinars and exchanges to talk about possibilities for developing enduring partnerships and exchange opportunities between US and Algerian universities. So we've got a great speaker with us today, Susan Sutton. I'll introduce her as well in a few minutes, but today is just our first introductory session so that we can also, for our future sessions, especially work collaboratively with the ministry formally for our future sessions to be able to get panelists from American universities, speak with representatives from Algerian universities, and really get the dialogue going again. Because this is an initiative that certainly the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research has long been putting out those interests to create more partnerships. Lakhdar, you and your group in the US have really been working on creating these partnerships as well. And so we're just excited to continue to be able to contribute to that effort. So we'll be excited to give an overview of the different possibilities today, and then preview what's to come. So let's see. And Mr. Agada, did you have a question while we wait? I see a hand up. No. Okay. So.
Yeah, would it be possible, or maybe you're planning on doing that later, to give us an idea about this initiative overall? Is this like a formal thing? Is this something that's funded? What's the framework for all of this?
Absolutely, and that's the point, exactly. So Hamza, what do you think? Should I get started with the introductions, or do you want to give people a little bit more?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think let's start with the instructions, and then we're recording this, so we'll be sharing this as well. I think a number of people have requested the recording so they can catch up.
Okay, good. And thank you for using the chat already. We've got a lot to cover, and we would really like to be able to hear also from you as participants as much as possible. So as we go through the discussion, we'll ask you to drop notes, notes or contributions or questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring that to see if we can stop and discuss as we go. But to launch us off, so I'm Leah Bitat. I'm the country representative for World Learning in Algeria. It's been a pleasure to work in Algeria for, well, World Learning has been in Algeria since 2005. I've been here for 11 years, and a lot of that has been just having the pleasure to help set up collaborative programs with Algerian institutions. Hamza will give you a good idea of the framework for World Learning. But yes, I wanted to give the framework here. The Ministry of Higher Education has been working closely with the US Embassy to explore those points for collaboration, of which there are many. Collaboration to advance research interests, teaching capacity, language of instruction, cultural exchange, many of those things. So we're happy to contribute to that effort. Again, so this, what we're launching today we're giving you an introduction of a program It, yes, is funded by the US Embassy and was developed in cooperation with the Ministry of Higher Education, looking at how to create these partnerships. And so we're starting off with a series of informational webinars. And what we hope to be able to give after that are some online training opportunities between institutions. So today is that introduction. I think I'll pass it to Hamza to give us more detailed insight into the program itself.
Thank you, Leah. And I'll just share my PowerPoint real quick. Let me know if it's working. Perfect, thank you. Just a little bit about the program. I think I'll talk a little bit about World Learning, especially our experience working with the university programs, especially in terms of helping youth and faculty to prepare for the world of employment, especially in the 21st century skills area. And so the name of the program is Higher Education Faculty Exchange Program. And as you can see, the objective is really to create those linkages between Algerian and American universities, especially administrators who are working on external cooperation, but also faculty members who are working directly with the students and how they can find those opportunities to collaborate with American universities, and as well as improve their capacity to serve the youth and prepare them for the world of employment. And so, as Leah has given a little bit of a background of World Learning, our work in Algeria, especially since 2005, we work a lot in the world of education and workforce development. And so just thanks to support from State Department, like the US Embassy, but also MEPI, we've been able to implement career development projects and start career services through centers at least 10 wilayas, through universities, but other institutional partners. We've also conducted a lot of research to identify economic opportunities in Algeria. We always try to make sure we're understanding the needs in the community so that we can also help channel those efforts towards those specific needs and help the youth prepare for those. We've also done work to validate an assessment tool that measures soft skills, and that helps us identify the impact of our projects through our trainings. We've also done work on entrepreneurship, because that's especially a key priority for the Algerian government and Algeria in general as a community. And so we've helped a lot of institutions and also youth start their own enterprises. And so also in terms of preparing youth for the workforce development, we've done a lot of work around mentorship. So we try to connect especially young women with successful professionals in different fields and try to sort of pass along that experience, but also the contacts, the network, and also we're trying to prepare them to enter the world of employment. And I'll skip through STEM, but really the objective of all of this is to really continue to do this work with the Algerian community, especially with university members. And the idea is to collaborate on incorporating 21st century market-ready skills into the curriculum, strengthening critical thinking, and also all of the skills that the youth will need to prepare for their own future. Key players in this program are the US Embassy in Algiers, thanks to whose support we're able to do this program. World Learning will be implementing this project, but really this is to serve the Algerian and American representatives of American universities and Algerian universities as well. So I think the participation of our participants today is going to be key to the success of this project. So we'll talk a little bit about the role, but really we expect your collaboration, and really we would like to understand your needs and priorities so that we can also tailor a lot of our programming towards that. Like Leah explained, this is an informal sort of orientation, but then as what we're trying to do through this program is really have a series of webinars on American Algerian University linkages, and the objective is to do to do like an overview, but also try to understand specific areas like alumni outreach, collaborations in terms of study abroad programs, and other opportunities for Algerian universities to collaborate with American universities. And Matt here, who will be talking in a minute, has been instrumental in helping us identify those speakers who will talk to us. And then we're also trying to identify those needs of the faculty. So we'll be doing the survey of all of the members who participate here, but also a larger survey to understand what the faculty would like to learn about in the second phase of the program. And the third point there is a 16-week online course that we're preparing for in 2022, and that's going to be based on the needs we have identified through the survey. And then we'll expect everybody to, work on follow-on projects, and we'll work together as we develop those projects, including maybe hosting American faculty for a program or conference or workshop here in Algeria. So that will be the last phase of the project. The last slide, and I'll give it to Matt. So this is our initial plan for the webinar. So you can see today is the first session to do an overview. And then the other sessions 2, 3, and 4, waiting on ministerial approval. We're trying to delve deeper into, for example, visiting faculty exchanges, research collaboration projects. So each session will be having a panel of representatives of American universities who will talk about those specific topics and the opportunities that are available for Algerian universities in those areas. And so I think just what we expect from the participants is really to represent the interests and priorities of those Algerian universities, because we really want to understand those priorities and needs. We would like you to spread the word and share the opportunity. I think this is the case where the more the merrier, the more we have participants, the more we can benefit, I think, a larger community. And then we also expect participants to actively be part of all the activities, especially like webinars, the survey that we're going to be handing out, and then also the course in 2022. We hope to help you develop some follow-on projects and also implement them to have a sustained impact of these activities. And then we'd like to work with you to create partnerships with American universities, as that's sort of the overall objective of this. So either through research project or hosting an American fellow who comes here for a conference or workshop, I think we'd like to explore ways for us to sustain the impact and create those partnerships in the future. So I think, again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I think I'll give this to Matt, but just one last point that I wanted to talk about is the survey. I'm going to drop it in the chat. So when you have a minute, please take a minute and fill it out. And I'll be sending reminders throughout, maybe towards the end of the session and maybe an email. So please take a minute and fill out that survey for us. Thank you.
Can I just add something real quick? If
Sure.
you could also drop into the chat, we can see your names, but let us know your name and which university you're from, so we know who we're talking to. Thanks.
Thank you.
Over to you, Matt.
Yes, that's my cue. Thank you, Leah and Hamza. I have the pleasure of introducing our amazing speaker for the rest of our time today. My name is Matt Brown, and I'm communicating from World Learning in Washington, D.C. To say this again, the topic for today, the main point, is to provide a kind of overview of all of the different ways, or some of the main ways, that universities in the United States connect with universities in other countries, including Algeria, with potential for new types of connections between Algerian universities and US universities. The world of higher education in the United States, as I'm sure you know, is very complicated. It's very big. It's a big country, very decentralized, lots of different kinds of universities, and lots of different types of connections that universities make with the rest of the world. It's a complex topic, and we're very fortunate today to have a speaker, I'm going to blank on her name, Dr. Susan Sutton. Sorry, Susan, no offense. Who I've always wanted to say this. She actually wrote the book about this topic. She comes to us with a 40-year career in higher education in many different ways, and much of that time has been spent on exactly the types of partnerships and linkages and connections that we're here to talk about today. Officially, Susan is representing the American Council on Education today. That's how we connected with her for the session. The American Council on Education is a very significant non-governmental American membership organization that supports all kinds of advocacy for higher education in the United States, as well as other types of initiatives. And I recommend that you take a look at their website as well to learn something about higher education in the United States. Susan is connected with them. And with that, Susan, please correct anything that I've gotten wrong about my introduction, but I'm happy to turn this over to you to teach us all about the world of university linkages from the United States perspective. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Matt. And I am delighted I'll be talking on a topic that really is, to me, one of the most important topics. Give me one second. One of the most important topics that we could be talking about today. Give me 1 second and I'll get it. I think I will get it all. There we go. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Yes, good. Okay. So the topic that I will be talking about is one that I am quite passionate about, and I believe it is one in which higher education institutions around the world have a huge role to play in making this a better world for all of us. So I'm very happy to set the stage for the exciting program that World Learning will be working on with the embassy in Algiers to foster deeper and more plentiful partnerships between US and Algerian universities. I'm going to break this topic into 6 parts with a Q&A at the end, but please feel free to pose questions, comments, thoughts in the chat along the way. But the 6 parts, the 6 steps to understanding the landscape of international partnerships in US higher education first begin with a few of the obligatory definitions, just to make sure we're all on the same page and know we're all talking about the same thing. Then moving on to the fact that this is an evolving landscape for US partnerships. IP, as you will see in a minute, stands for International Partnership. It's an evolving landscape. It's a work in progress for all of us. But then within this evolving landscape, where are we now in part 3 in terms of the goals and strategies that most US institutions of higher education are pursuing? Where are we now, part 4, in the structures, processes, supports that they have in place to do partnership work? Where are we now, part 5, in the different types and modalities, that is methods of carrying out partnerships? Finally, where are we now in terms of the lessons that have been learned, both from the successes, but also from the mistakes of the past? So with that, let's get started with a few definitions, just as I said, to make sure we're all on the same page. First, if you are not familiar with it, there is a classification system for the different kinds of US institutions of higher education. HEI stands for higher education institution. There's a classification system known as the Carnegie classification system coming out of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. This is widely used across the United States, and it's based very much on the number of degrees that are given every year at a certain level at the institution. So we have doctoral universities, it must give 20 or more doctoral degrees and usually have high research activity. Master's colleges and universities that give 50 or more master's degrees, but less than 20 doctoral. Baccalaureate colleges, those are largely undergraduate institutions. At least half the degrees have to be baccalaureate, fewer than 40 master's and 20 doctoral degrees. Let me say something about baccalaureate colleges. There's a misunderstanding internationally that maybe baccalaureate colleges in the US are universities light, that is a lighter form of higher education. They are not. They are some of them are among the most prestigious and most rigorous forms of undergraduate education that we offer. So there's just simply a different type of institution that really focuses on undergraduate learning. Then there are associate colleges, 2-year degree institutions. Also, we have some institutions that focus on one topic, such as health or engineering or business, and tribal colleges from the American Indian Educational Consortium. So we're broken down into those categories. Here's what it looks like in terms of percentages of the last time the Carnegie classification system did its state or population census of institutions in 2018. It's going to be updated very soon, but this is the most recent. And you'll see that that associate's colleges are the most numerous. Doctoral universities have the most students, and it's a very interesting mix. It's worth spending some time on. Also, this is split between public and private. And private is split between nonprofit, which is the more traditional form in the US, and private for-profit, which is something new on the landscape. So as you're looking for US partners, it's worth knowing these different institutions. Now, I will use IP throughout this for international partnership. Here's what I think it means. And I did write the book, but no, there are many definitions out there. But I think the simple one works for me. An international partnership, when you use the word partnership as opposed to collaboration simply, partnership is a formal agreement. There's something formal about it. It's an agreement to work together for mutual goals. So you're agreeing to come together and work for some common aims or ends or purposes between institutions. So this is not these are not one-on-one faculty collaborations in research, as important as those collaborations are, and they are. These are agreements between institutions, and these institutions are in 2 or more nations, or they represent 2 or more nations, because it could be an organization that is multinational in scope. But most often in higher education partnerships are between 2 or more higher education institutions, HEIs, but sometimes between an HEI and another type of organization like the UN or an NGO or municipalities, governmental agencies, etc. Finally, well, in the definition section here, I will be referring repeatedly to statistics that come from 2 surveys, each of which is done every 5 years. The one comes from the organization that I am representing and that I'm proud to be part of, the American Council on Education. Every 5 years does a survey entitled Mapping Internationalization on US Campuses. The last edition was in 2017, so you know that the next one is coming out next year, and indeed they're tabulating the results even as I speak. But the 2017 results are interesting enough. So this survey surveys US institutions, higher education institutions, on the state of internationalization, that is their international activities and engagements. And it gets a response rate of well over 1,000 institutions, so it's quite a reliable survey. The second survey I will refer to is from the International Association of Universities, of which I have served on the board now and then. And this is an international organization based in Paris that also does a survey of the state of internationalization. And their last survey came out in 2019. It's the 5th of their surveys. And here they get responses from thousands of institutions around the world. So it gives us a more global perspective on such matters as international partnerships. All right, those definitions under our belt. The evolving landscape of US international partnerships. Remember, I said it's a work in progress. I will start globally or internationally with a chart from the IAU, the International Association of University survey, that when institutions were asked, what are the top 3 most important benefits of internationalization to your institution of higher education? Here are the responses, with the green being the top, the whatever this is, bluish, purplish, being the second most important, and the tan being the third most important, and broken down by region of the world. What is just jumped out at me the minute I saw this last survey was that, look what's #1 in every region of the world, except, whoops, North America. That would be the US and Canada, where it is #2. That's pretty good. #1 for the US and Canada, for North America, is increased international awareness or deeper engagement with global issues by students. So student learning is #1, but increased international cooperation across the world now is seen as the driving goal of international activities. Very interesting, because in 2005, international collaboration didn't even make the list except for Africa. That was the one part of the world where it made the list, but it didn't even make it. This is new, that international collaboration has moved to the forefront of what international activities are about. worldwide. Now, in the US, this growth in international partnerships, remember IP means international partnerships, has been recent, just as it has for the rest of the world. In the US, it goes back about 100 years. So you may say that's not recent, but when it started small, and it has not gained momentum until this century, really, and at the level that we would like to see it. So it all began with the University of Delaware and the Sorbonne, and coming up with the first junior year abroad program, roughly 1923. There's some debate. Here's a photograph of the students going over to France on a ship in the 1920s. That's what it looked like. But 1984, ACE, the American Council on Education, in their handbook on internationalization, still reported that most US higher education institutions had no partnerships. 2012, the mapping internationalization survey done, 21% still had no international partnerships whatsoever. 21% were, however, and this is just 10 years ago, were starting them for the first time. And 48%, the ones that did have them, and there's some oddities of the numbers here, don't worry about it, 48% were intensifying the partnership work that they already were engaging in. So it's that recent that it has really taken off in the United States. Whoops, let me go back. And the 2017 survey showed that 13% more were starting them for the first time. So right now, this is the moment where US institutions are waking up in large numbers to the possibility of partnerships, meaning that there are literally thousands of US institutions looking for partnerships right now. Now, historically, most US international partnerships fell into one of the two categories that you're seeing here, which comes from a book published by the Association of International Education Administrators in 1992, 30 years ago. Far and away, the most common were student mobility partnerships, student exchanges, or one-way direct enrollment programs, mainly for US students to do study abroad, such as we saw with that example of Delaware and the Sorbonne. Most of the partnerships for these, student mobility, some, and world development has been part of this, cooperative development and technical assistance projects between the US and the global South, in capacity building, local development, etc. This was largely for the large US universities, particularly the public land grant universities that got involved in development work. So those have been the two categories that have been most common. But today, US partnerships are diversifying, pursuing many goals, taking many forms, as we are increasingly coming to understand their power, that they can do much more than we had thought they could. They span the academic scope of teaching, research, service / civic engagement. They include student exchanges, capacity building still, those are very important, but also faculty exchanges, collaborative teaching, joint and dual curricula, research centers, joining in the international initiatives of surrounding community or businesses, multiple partners, consortia, networks. They're taking lots of different forms now, and I'll say more about that later. Whatever the specific motivation or form that these partnerships take, international partnerships also, often unexpectedly, are coming to change how we understand ourselves, what goals we even consider worth pursuing in higher education, even the structures of higher education itself. They have carried this unanticipated benefit that is part of what's making them so important and why they have risen so dramatically to the forefront of international activities. They do something beyond the specific activities we build them for. They lead us to think in new ways, just as the student exchange partnerships were intended to lead students to think in new ways. The partnerships in general are leading faculty and staff and our surrounding communities to think in new ways. And they do this because they offer two kinds of mutual benefit to the partners. What you might call transactional or instrumental benefit. This is an exchange kind of benefit where you send us 2 students, we'll send you 2 students. It's like a marketplace transaction. But they also offer this generative transformational benefit, which generates new activities that you hadn't anticipated when you started, or transforms the structures and processes of each partner. They lead us to think in very different ways. And that is their incredible power for making a difference in this world. So now, please ignore, my dog is on the floor beside me, so please ignore his jingle and jangle now and then. Using those categories that I gave you before, with some of them at least, what percentage, whoops, let me go back, sorry. What percentage of US institutions have partnerships at this point in time in different, in these different categories? You'll see that 98% of this is from the most recent ACE survey, 98% of doctoral institutions do have partnerships, 95% of partnerships, 90 masters, 91% of undergraduate. But when we get to community colleges, associates, it's 56%. And remember, they are very, the largest number of US institutions right there. I keep doing this. Also, when we notice in the most recent ACE survey, when you ask what are the most important international activities, and this is something to bear in mind, that you'll see the partnerships come in third. It's still having the more important ones for the US are increasing study abroad and recruiting international students. That is, student mobility still looms large on the US horizon, but partnerships are moving up there. Now, so this is a real growth and exploration phase for international partnerships in the US. The last 2 years have added to this. The multiple crises of 2020, 21 had really challenged international partnerships in higher education in general, and in the US in specific. Many of us, when COVID first made itself felt in the US, particularly in late February 2020, we thought, well, that's going to stymie partnership work for a while. That's really going to end things for a while, or bring them to a screeching halt. But the opposite actually happened. This again is that power of partnerships to do something we don't expect. At the Institute of International Education, another association, online webinar in May 2020, there was an online poll. 57% of the more than 400 participating HEIs said that their international partnerships were actually becoming more active during COVID. More active, not less active, more active. And that they found themselves responding to partner needs in new and very creative ways, from supporting students who were stranded at the partner, to increasing their use of various formats, such as virtual formats, to sending medical supplies back and forth. Here, I'm based in Philadelphia now. Temple University here in Philadelphia found that at one point, its Chinese partners were sending it personal protective equipment for its hospitals. And at another point, Temple was sending PPE to its Chinese partners. Why did this happen? Why did partnerships become more active when our mobility was restricted? Well, this is due partly to the urgency of the situation. The programs were disrupted and they had to be, the stranded students and faculty had to be dealt with. There was no getting around it. So partners had to find a way to work virtually. Also, it turned out that strong, well-constructed partnerships could rise to the challenge. They had the strength to do something, such as send equipment back and forth. The global nature of COVID. We all have something to learn from each other and how it's how it's spreading and how we can meet it. Also, this was an unusual one. The fact that we were locked down actually gave faculty and students more time to collaborate with their partners. They actually weren't caught up with walking down the hallway or going on a trip. They had more time to actually get on their computers or on their phones and communicate with their partners. And also the expertise that partnerships already had in various forms of virtual exchange or communication for teaching was now proving itself valuable in many other kinds of collaborations. So for all those reasons, rather than tamping down during the crises of the last couple of years, partnerships tamped up. So Lehigh University, a major engineering university, private in the United States, came up with this chart of what happened to its international partnerships in 2020. That they found expansion in all of these elements, expansion in partner geography, that actually they were dealing with what had been more with partners all around the world, rather than focusing on a few parts of the world. Some of their partnerships that were in parts of the world they hadn't focused on before, but they still had signed some MOUs with them, became much more important because they had international students from those countries at the Lehigh campus that they needed to find out how to best accommodate them. Mobility, virtual collaboration increased. So mobility went down, but virtual collaboration increased the mutuality of the partners. The role for faculty and staff. More faculty and staff were getting engaged with partners. The role for students. More students were getting engaged with partners through virtual exchange, more than could ever travel abroad on their own. And administrative, that Lehigh came to understand that they needed to put even more support into their international partnerships than they had before, because all of these benefits were coming out of them in this intense period of time. So just one example I'll give, a public urban university, which Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis goes by IUPUI. It's a Research One university in the capital city of the state of Indiana, and Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, which is a very important STEM university in Mexico. When in 2020, all classes at IUPUI had to go online. No students, not US students, not international students, were to be on campus due to COVID. Everything went online. So an art faculty member at IUPUI decided, well, if I'm going to teach online, why don't I add in some international voices to a course I'm teaching on design thinking to boost creativity in business and social sectors. But she didn't know she didn't have any international connections. So she went to the international office of the university and said, I'd like to bring in one of our partners from overseas to teach this course jointly with me online. So the international office said, oh, Tec de Monterrey does stuff like that. And Monterrey Tech, as it's known, said, yeah, we have a faculty member here who could do that. So the two used video conferences to identify what they had in common, that they would like to teach a course together with students meeting virtually. They then had the students decide how to make that class work. Whoops. They actually engaged, engaged the students in designing the course, and the students decided that they would do a combination of, use a combination of technologies to have a joint course with each other, that they would use their own cell phones or mobile devices to work in pairs, a US and a Mexican student giving each other feedback on their design projects. They would set up a website and a collaboration hub through something called Slack, where they would share their projects, etc. It turned out to be a very valuable experience that did not exist before COVID. But here we have faculty who'd never done this before jumping in, and the partnership being put to a new use, etc. That's just by way of one example. I have a couple of others here, but I'm just going to show them to you for you to look at later, because something I meant to say at the start of this, these slides will be made available to you. So I've put much more on them than I'm going to be able to talk about, but you will find there another example, University of Wisconsin and Obihiro University in Japan, doing a field study course in agriculture that popped up during COVID for the first time, being done virtually, but allowing US students to actually walk the fields of Japan virtually. And of course, there was all this scientific collaboration going on during COVID. This is a map done in 2020 showing the different partnerships just on researching COVID-19 that were activated during the pandemic. So a lot got stimulated during the pandemic that increased the use of partnerships and increased the use of virtual exchange, VE, that is the use of online forms of collaboration. And this, one of those unexpected benefits of partnerships that we really, is why I'm so enamored of partnerships. The increased use of VE during the last 2 years flattened resource differentials between partners in which there were significant resource differentials. It flattened them and is leading to a kind of democratization in many partnerships. And this was brought to our attention by our colleagues in various parts of the world. Here's a quote from Brazil. Here's a quote from South Africa that say the same thing. And they were not collaborating on these, but basically saying moving from academic or physical mobility to virtual mobility enabled a more active role for universities in the global South, a more balanced internationalization panorama, because everybody can get online and some of the resource differentials fall away when you're doing that. And here from South Africa, the very same things that just led to greater equality and mutual benefit. Very interesting development. And that development also intersected with another driver of the last 2 years in the US and in many parts of the world. This is really critically important for the US. So as you talk with your US partners or try to develop US partnerships, you probably want to be aware that DEI, what's known as DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is a very strong value and driver of US higher education at this moment in time. This is our moment of racial reckoning, long overdue and much welcome. But what was happening with partnerships in this sort of greater equality when in the virtual space and the greater accessibility of international or global learning to students and faculty really intersected and added to DEI initiatives at US universities. So it opened up the possibility of international interaction for more and more students, including those who would never be able to study abroad. And it also opened up a question, this last point here, it opened up the question of where do we have our partnerships? And with this, if we move to a greater use of VE in our partnerships, where can we expand our partnerships to so as to create a more equitable distribution of international partnerships around the world? Wrong direction. Here we go. So here from the ACE mapping survey, we see where US institutions tend to have their partnerships according to regions of the world. Asia overwhelmingly is the leader, and China and India, Southeast Asia, Japan, of course. You'll see the Middle East comes in down the list somewhat. So I broke down the top receiver partnerships for US institutions within the Middle East, and here they are. I've lost my arrow. Here we go. Here we go. Starts with Turkey, Saudi Arabia. You notice Morocco there on the list. These are the top ones. But you'll see that it's not like in some of the other parts. So there's much room for growth in the Middle East and North Africa, definitely. So the last 18 months have made clear that international partnerships have to be seen as more than physical mobility, that they can withstand time and turmoil. They are critical for broadening access and equity in higher education, institutionally, nationally, internationally. They are essential to the collaboratively built knowledge needed for the 21st century. They should be expanded to include more HEIs in more nations. They have this capacity to create this vibrant global network of higher education that works for all of us. They, in my opinion, are central to the human future, as a matter of fact, and they are witnessing, this is their moment of great expansion, reformulation, creativity. So, we are at a particular moment in time that's really suitable for world learning to be doing this program. So within that broad framework, I'm looking to see, let's go forward to part 3, goals and strategies. So we can, what do US institutions want out of partnerships? And here, I'll begin by framing it with something that came out in July 2021, that is just a couple of months ago, jointly from the US Department of State and the US Department of Education. And many of us have memorized some of these phrases since they came out because they are so important. This is our government saying, the robust exchange of students, researchers, scholars, and educators, along with international education efforts between the US and other countries, is so important. It's now a national priority. These relationships are necessary to address shared challenges, enhance American prosperity, they have to say that, and contribute to global peace and security, and also to equip all Americans with the global and cultural competencies that they need for the 21st century. So the US government for the first time has made this really strong statement about the importance of these partnerships for these reasons from the viewpoint of national interest. As we look worldwide, I'll get it back down to the US in a second again from now, but if we look worldwide, we'll see that there are lots of different reasons, goals that different countries have for partnerships, from entering an institution and into emerging global networks of higher ed, preparing students, attracting students, doing cutting edge research, raising ranking and reputation, expanding curricular offerings in a variety of ways, improving institutional and national capacity, supporting their surrounding communities and nations, and addressing global issues. All of those are at play. Not all of them are that much at play in the US. But I would be very curious to know, maybe in the discussion section, we can talk about this. What of these sounds most true for the Algerian case? But here, if we're looking at the US case, here the question was not about partnerships, but the top 3 reasons for internationalizing. As you already know from the IAU survey, improving student preparedness for a global era is the number one, overwhelmingly the number one reason expressed by US higher education institutions for why they want to internationalize. Diversifying the student body on campus and attracting students come in second, etc. So these, generating new revenue, I hate to say it, has become an issue, but that's because of our outrageously high tuitions. We can talk about that in another webinar, but in any event, you see that this is it's the student issue. It really is the driver here. And why partnerships to achieve some of those goals, whether it's student learning or research or any of the other goals? Why partnerships as opposed to more informal kinds of collaborations? Well, that's because, and let's look at institutional partnerships carry this kind of institutional framework. They carry a commitment over time that they're not one-off collaborations. They are intended to last for a period of time, but also they have the particular potential for certain kinds of impact. They can spread beyond their founding individuals. They can create a connection to the partner country that serves as a platform for further development over time. They create this institution-wide atmosphere where students will learn about the partner country from multiple faculty on their own campuses, because those faculty have had some engagement with the partner country. They generate the kind of dialogue needed to generate new ideas, rework curricula, advanced research. They do foster mobility, but over time with this kind of snowball effect, that is how a snowball gets bigger and bigger over time as it rolls downhill. They can attract external funding. and they share costs, resources, risks among the partners. So when you make a collaboration a partnership, you're giving it this particular kind of power to do these things. Now, having said that, and that's why, and let me back up, that's why moving from informal collaborations to formal collaborations is underway. Having said that, unfortunately, many of these formal collaborations, and I bet you can attest to this, some of you, from your own experience, end up not doing much. It's actually true that until recently, most partnerships failed. I hate to say it, but it's true. And when I say that, what I really mean is most memoranda of understanding, most MOUs went nowhere. That's what I mean. They might have been paper only. They were signed, but nothing ever happened. Or dormant, that means sleeping. They once had activity, but then they stopped. Or lopsided. One partner is getting a whole lot more out of it than the other. And that can be even sometimes in an exploitative way that's detrimental to the other partner. So unfortunately, many partnerships have ended up that way. And why? Well, fundamentally, because this is new territory. I've been making that point. This is new territory for higher education. Many of us are just starting partnerships for the first time. And even those who've had partnerships for a while are realizing they should reposition and approach them in new ways. Partnerships have long been viewed as a minor tactic. They little understanding of their full potential, little understanding of how to plan, initiate, manage, harness them, left to individual initiatives, the occasional research or development project, and the study abroad office. And some of them have been overlaid with a continuing residue of colonialism and systemic inequalities as well. So all of those factors have argued against partnerships unless we start thinking about them in new ways. And all of those factors have led to these various kinds of practices that are really not very good, like freewheeling approach to MOUs, signing them on the first meeting rather than waiting to see if this really will be a good partnership, too top down or too bottom up, poor communications, and so forth. I'll lead you to read through the rest of this list at your leisure later. So as a result, and this is important to understand in terms of the goals of US institutions and their partnerships, as you begin working with them, is many US HEIs are becoming strategic about developing individual partnerships or an overall set, or what we might call portfolio of partnerships. Strategic, meaning what they're really trying now to do is think more carefully and in a strategic way, allocating resources in a strategic way so that they're getting partnerships that fit their mission, whatever that mission of that institution is, their strategic plans, their institutional strategic plans, their particular kinds of students, their particular strengths that build already on what they already are doing internationally, that don't spread their resources too thinly, that enable the institution to make good on its promises. So there will be no more of those paper only MOUs that have deep impact. They're looking for partnerships with deep impact that engage a wide range of faculty, staff, and students that can be sustained and that unlock the full potential of partnerships. So in that strategizing, you'll see that US institutions are now, many of them will define their actual partnership goals. If you go to their websites, you will find, here's the kind of partnerships we're looking in. And they're moving toward fewer but more intense partnerships. So it's not how many partnerships you have, but how many active partnerships you have. That they will develop, they have several categories of partnerships ranging from individual faculty collaborations that are institutionalized to university-wide commitments. They're trying to provide a framework that gives broader meaning to individual partnerships, and they're trying to encourage faculty to think broadly and creatively about partnerships. So again, in the ACE poll, has your institution articulated a formal strategy for international partnership development? You'll see here, again, broken down by type of institution, that if we look at the total on the far right, across all institutions, about 20, almost 20%, almost 1/5, do have such a formal strategy already in writing, and another 23 are developing it. If you look at doctoral institutions, you see it's much higher than that. So again, if you want to work with a US institution, you may want to look and find their formal strategy for partnership development. And even more institutions have specific guidelines for developing or approving partnerships that did not exist 15, 20 years ago, but they exist now and they must be followed. There's a certain procedure to all of this. And institutions are paying much greater attention to what's called the partnership life cycle, how you go from early steps of defining what you want to do and narrowing down and getting the scope of the project, formalizing the partnership, planning, implementing, putting it into action, evaluating, and then what more do we want to do? And we go around and again and again. And there's a lot of attention being paid to how you manage a partnership over time like that. And a lot of attention being paid to the overall portfolio, meaning how many partnerships does an institution have in particular areas that it's interested in? Where are these partnerships located? And here again, I think is a chance to say that US institutions are definitely looking to broaden where they have partnerships. It's been too narrow. Okay, part 4. And I do want to get to the Q&A, so let me move more quickly through some of this. So US institutions are becoming more strategic. They're setting goals that have to do with their own mission. Each institution will have its own goals. Most of it revolves around student learning, but some of it at research institutions will revolve around research. And at certain kinds of institutions, the community engagement will also be a key part. They're also at US institutions developing structures, processes, supports to make that happen. They're no longer assuming partnerships will just happen without support. They have to have support. So partnerships can be cost effective in doing certain things, but they're not zero cost. An institution does have to put something into them. They require time, staffing, support. They require you to have dialogue and build relationships and to plan, test, and rework over time. So new international partnership organizational structures and processes are emerging across the US, trying to connect what used to be, let's say, the international office and the financial office and the student admissions office and the research office that used to operate in doing international partnerships separately, now connecting them, getting them to talk to each other, designating some individual who's charged with partnership oversight. And that is the person you most want to get into your discussions when you talk to US institutions, this one. And establishing often an international partnership committee to review possible new partnerships. So the international office is often the central hub for convening all of those different people. And that's where the international partnership manager is most likely to be located, in the international office, whatever it is called. But international offices are developing a lot of expertise on all of those different activities you see on this page that will make or break the success of a partnership. And so, as I've been saying, there's this increasing intentionality, strategizing, professionalization of partnership management in US higher education. And many institutions are now moving to having a staff member who is the person who oversees all partnerships of any sort at the institution. Doctoral institutions, almost half of them have such a person. Master's, pretty close, baccalaureate even. And they come with titles like International Partnership Manager, Global Engagement Director, etc. And now, in terms of funding partnerships, often we get stuck here, thinking we can't start a partnership unless we get a special grant to do it. And it's always nice to get those special grants. And I have gone after them when I was I was for a long time Associate Vice President of International Affairs for Indiana University. So I have gone after those partnerships, and I've worked with World Learning on those grants. But we get stuck on thinking we have to have a grant to do this. Grants are great, and you should be always scanning to see what grants are out there. But we've learned that, you can get started in a small way and build up over time and attract those grants and have the basis for attracting those grants by doing all of these things, starting small and building up. using existing, what in the US we call seed funds. Often we have a grant that a faculty member can apply for, a couple $1,000s that could be put toward getting a partnership started, or convincing your institution that they do need to put some baseline funding, staffing, and IT support into partnership development, and that this will be a good ROI, return on investment, for the institution in terms of attracting students, in terms of getting external grants. We did this at Indiana, where actually this one here, indirect costs, any international grant on anything, it didn't have to be a partnership, any international grant that was gotten by the university, part of the overhead, the indirect costs, would go to support new partnership development. That we just said that's part of what a good university would have to be operating in the world today. You can work with your fundraising office to go seek donations, work with local businesses and organizations. They often are very interested in supporting partnerships with particular countries. You can develop ways of balancing exchanges that enable partners with less resources still to send their students, if you balance it in certain ways that I'll talk about in a minute or two. You could, US institutions, many of them are, the large ones are opening what are called gateways in particular regions or nations, where they actually have an office in a particular part of the world that makes it easier and more cost effective for their faculty to have partnerships in that part of the world. Participating in networks or consortia spreads the need for resources out among many. Substituting online interactions, definitely, for in-person ones saves a lot of money. And recognize that over time, as you have a strong partnership, the transaction costs will actually lessen, just as they would in any business. And as I said, always be scanning for grants that are available. Types and modalities. There we go. Okay, I must have left an errant slide in there. So in the US, well, worldwide, again, this is just to affirm that that multilateral international student exchanges worldwide are very widespread. I can't see the edge of this chart myself. Sorry, let me get rid of. There we go. But not for North America. We go for international. You'll see research collaboration is very strong, but outgoing mobility for our students. I'm sorry, let me, since I probably confused it, but now I can see the whole chart. In North America, we want outgoing mobility for our students. So that should be built into most partnerships. We want incoming students, sometimes fee paying, right? And we want research, a collaboration. Much of the rest of the world, there's some other things going on here. Fortunately, with the Middle East, research collaboration is, we share that in common. So let me break this down. So we want our students to go abroad to the greatest extent possible, but and that is growing for the US, and it will as the travel restrictions of COVID, it will come back because the number has been going up very steadily. But still, only 1 in 10 US students actually studies abroad, and most of this is for less than a semester. And 1/3 is going to just 3 nations, the UK, Italy, and Spain. So study abroad is not at all where we want it to be. Oh, good heavens. Sorry. There we go. So international partnerships can be part of getting more US students to study abroad. If you construct them in a certain way, they can open up programs in nations beyond the usual suspects. They can develop programs relevant to the students at the partner, to students who have not historically studied abroad. They can shift the parameters of timing and length to accommodate the partner's needs. They can insert the experiential learning components that have proven to be the most attractive for US students. They can create binational teams or cohorts of students who work together on projects and create that kind of dialogue that is so important, etc. So partnerships can be a major factor in increasing study abroad for US students, and it can be done in various ways. Here's that: calculating exchanges in new ways. the US, we might want to send you 15 short-term students for a short-term experience at your institution, but we would take 3 of your full-year students, 3 of your students for full year in exchange. That's the kind of creative balancing that deals with the resource issues. Sandwich programs where it's part virtual, then you have an on-campus form phase, and then it goes back to virtual again. Or all virtual binational cohorts of students. Joint conferences for faculty and students are developing various kinds of 2+2, 4+1 programs, etc. And working with partners to go beyond the usual study abroad locations and activities. So that curricular collaboration, here you see that it is increasingly being used. Dual or joint degrees for doctoral institutions are now engaged. 58 over half are now engaging in that kind of thing with international partnerships. Joint degrees where it's not 2 separate degrees, but 1 single degree with 2 names on it. COIL courses, COIL is collaborative online international learning, it's our virtual exchange. Really is jumping up. A third of US institutions of all sorts are now doing that. These are ways to get students out or to have the kind of experience they would have had they gone on study abroad. It's come to them virtually. Now, US institutions are also interested in scientific or research collaboration, and you can see here, this is a map done actually in 2014, so it's a while ago, but it was showing a map of scientific collaboration around the world, but again showing there are large parts of the world that need to be drawn into this map because they have a lot of research expertise and opportunity to come on board with it through partnerships. And there's a lot to be gained by approaching research collaboration, not just one-on-one faculty collaboration, but through institutional partnerships that allow more faculty and departments to get involved and can be sustained over time and can spread into research teaching collaboration as well. And there's also more and more examination of something known as the collaborative centers of excellence, particularly internationally collaborative centers of excellence, where a group of universities bands together to create a unit of involving all of them in some very significant research on a particular topic. And this becomes a form of capacity building as well as firsthand research. It's a very important and dynamic form of research partnership that is gaining a lot of traction to pull together universities in the global north and the global south into real mutual benefit. Now, there's some best practices that we're learning about research collaboration among universities in different nations. About you have to really set the expectations in the environment and maybe do some training back and forth, provide research capacity building if that is needed. But also, and here's something that I've learned very much at Indiana University, where Indiana University's biggest international partnership is with Moi University in Eldoret, Kenya, Western Kenya, and it's in the field of health and medicine. But we found that the doctors and the nurses and the dentists who were collaborating really said, we need to know about the history, language, culture, politics of the partner country. Even though we're doing science, practice, and research, we can't really do it fully collaboratively unless we have all of that as well. So research, it's not just the research, it's the framing of that research. And for US institutions, as you probably know, we now must pay a great deal of attention to risk management and intellectual property rights and reporting and health and safety. And we have a lot of requirements now that as you come into partnerships, our legal offices are going to have to deal with. It's not because we don't want the partnerships, it's because we have to assure certain kinds of standards are being met. And partnerships are increasingly exploring the use of virtual exchange. As I've been saying, this is really growing. And at first, VE was viewed as an emergency substitute for physical mobility, but I think now it's Two is becoming something that has a special magic to it. And the term I don't even like the term virtual exchange anymore, but we use it. It's the term that's out there because it's not virtual, it's real. It's those are real interactions, and they are meaningful interactions, and they're not just exchanges. They're actually sometimes creating something new that didn't exist before the dialogue. So as one scholar puts it, VE is not virtual, it's online. It's not converting in-person content, it's developing online experience. It's not wishing we could do this in person, it's delighting in the potential to reach people through the internet. Very powerful. Okay, the final section, very quickly, lessons learned. From starting partnerships in the first place to sustaining and enhancing them over time, and why US institutions sometimes raise issues that may sound strange to you, but it's because we've learned a lot of lessons by making a lot of mistakes. We've learned that you need to take the time to develop partnerships properly. No more signing MOUs after a nice dinner in Bangkok, let us say. That effective partnership development takes time. It is a process, an evolving, collaborative, creative, iterative process in which you have to define your own institution's goals and processes. You have to build knowledge, trust, and relationships. You have to identify compelling, viable arenas for cooperation. You have to pull together or marshal resources. You have to obtain necessary approvals across the institution, engage as many individuals and units as you can, and plan initial activities. That can never be done on one meeting. And again, I'll let you peruse these at your leisure later. It begins by knowing yourself and having a lot of conversation within your own institution so that you can present your institution properly. Then having the conversation with potential partners in which you even define basic terms like, what does partnership mean to you? And you explore a range of possibilities and a range of challenges that may come up. Then you take those possibilities back to your own institution for further conversation there and seeing who at your institution would run with this idea and what kind of resources you can marshal for it. And during all of those discussions, you identify faculty who really want to do this, the initial areas of focus, you move back and forth between long-range goals and immediate possibilities. And sometimes partnerships start with the first long-range goals. We want to have a center on this topic. Sometimes they start with the second. Oh, let's do a neat little research project on this or that, or have a study abroad project on this or that. But at some point, they're going to meet in the middle, in order to be sustained over time. And then once you've done all of that, you have to set the partnership in motion and really specify these sorts of things that go into the MOU. And often US institutions now have a two-stage MOU process. The first is a non-binding general MOU that we agree to work on developing projects together. The second is a binding, almost contractual commitment to action that really spells out what's going to happen in each specific project you're going to work on together. So both of those may be needed. And we also are focusing then on what enables partnerships to grow, root, and take flight over time. High-performing partnerships do all of this. They explicitly know that they're going to change over time, and they brainstorm and reflect and develop changes. They conduct regular monitoring and assessment. They spread across and transform each partner institution. They are embedded in the overall partnership strategies of each. They involve frequent communication, sustained relationship building. They have the capacity to deal with difficulties and procedures for doing that. And they involve genuine dialogue, commitment, mutuality, and equity. Those are the hallmarks of high-performing partnerships. And they have, that last part has come about because there's been a dark side to the way internationalization has sometimes been carried out, and I'm sure you know it. Students seen as a source of revenue and not properly supported, brain drain, headlong rush into international work, one-sided exchanges, cultural imperialism, etc. We have to be very careful not to keep going in that direction. And we have to do things such as this, managing partnerships between HEIs and nations with unequal financial resources. We still want those partnerships, but we can't let who has the most money determine what the partnership is all about. And we have to articulate the assets that each partner brings and develop meaningful benefits, but rather than identical benefits for each side, and really tackle the inequities of higher education globally in a very serious and thoughtful way. And with that, I've come to the end. This is a quote from Simon Anholt, who gave the plenary presentation a couple of years ago at the European Association of International Education, but I really like it. The universities of the world are a sort of new diplomatic network that has never really been lit up yet, but it could and it should. I think the future of higher education and the future of the world indeed are going to depend on us being able to do this together. So that's what I have to say. I will stop sharing my screen and let's have some questions and answers. Or let's have some comments. What does it look like from the Algerian perspective? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand and speak. Does this resonate with how Algerian universities are approaching partnerships, with your own experiences? Are there questions about anything I've said? The floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure people are forming their questions, getting them ready to type into the chat. Thank you for doing that, everyone. I can see, there we go. Susan, thank you so much for such an interesting and informative overview as we went along. Let's see. Okay. Okay.
Well, I can always ask a question, which is that one, like, so what has, my question really is, I want to know more about the Algerian case. What kinds of partnerships have you had? And with, how many, let me ask, how many of you have had partnerships with US universities?
You can use the hand raise function. You can
raise your hand literally.
Yep. Let's see, it might be difficult. I see Adrar, I know has had international partnerships. We worked there a few times. I know Lakhdar, you've worked on several international partnerships, right? With a few.
With Algeria.
Okay. Do you want to describe some of those?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Lakhdar Boukero. I'm the Director of International Programs and Global Initiatives in the College of Engineering and Computing at Florida International University.
Mm-hmm.
We have had several partnerships. The first one started like 4 years ago with the University of Bagi. I assume that all the colleagues from Algeria understand English, yes? Yeah, we're all speaking English. Okay, so the result of that partnership led to getting some funding for a project that we are currently implementing in Bagi in relation to some of the work that we are doing here and also with Morocco. We also have other partnerships that we have developed over the last 12 months with the University of Flagouat, the University of Sétif 1, University of Constantine 3, a private school in Sétif. We're working on one with the University of Algiers. The idea, and I agree with you, Dr. Sutton, is not to let these things sit in a drawer. We are really looking at exchange programs, looking at hosting Algerian students, because we do offer TAs and graduate assistantships, you know, that kind of thing. So we're always looking for students, and you highlighted that in your presentation. The other thing that we are looking for are opportunities for our faculty to collaborate on some of these projects. Mm-hmm. This project, for example, in Bagi involves 4 different departments at FIU. So it's really a broad approach. And I think, one of the other important aspects is to try to see how we can really impact the Algerian higher education environment.
Mm-hmm.
I am originally from Algeria. I have been here in the US for a little over 40 years. And I have lots of friends and colleagues in Algeria. I also wear the hat of the president of the Algerian-American Association for Science, Technology, and Entrepreneurship here in the United States. So trying to get this with Algeria is really a very important step. And the last thing I want to mention is I just wrote a book with some colleagues, Algerian colleagues in Algeria and in France on the Algerian university system. We just published it a few months ago, both in Algeria and across the world.
Great.
So it's a challenge, but it can be done. Let's put it this way.
Yes. Yes. It's a challenge, but it can be done. And exactly the way you're doing, you're exploring these possibilities, you're making good on your commitments. You're working through organizations that can be very supportive of what you're doing. And so it can be done, as I've been saying, it must be done. I think the US has much to gain. Our institutions have really much to gain in creating partnerships with Algeria. Let me say that I have been involved in projects over the last couple of years in expanding partnerships for US institutions in Sudan, which only recently became open for us to be able to do that. And although it has had some troubles recently, again, needless to say, when working on that project with Sudan, Palestine, Indonesia, etc., institutions that didn't, let me rephrase this, partnerships that seemed impossible to people until they started getting to know each other suddenly became very possible and very real. And it's the factor that is so important here, and that I've been trying to stress, is the human connection factor here. That it starts with making those human connections. And you can start, as you have done, the Florida International FIU, which is a great institution, by the way. And I know your international folks quite well. They're terrific. That it can start by exploring the connections you already have. Do you have, for example, from the Algerian side, do you have graduates who are now at US universities whom you could contact, who would begin to get some conversations going? Have you been at conferences, let's say scientific conferences or any kind of professional conference where you've encountered a colleague who's working in a similar area or teaching a similar subject? Can you begin to talk to them about, hey, might we do something together? It could start small, as I've been saying. World Learning is stepping forward, I believe, to try to also assist in identifying potential partners. I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but in the sorts of topics you might be interested in, etc. But it starts with a simple conversation. It does not end with that conversation. That's the other point I've been trying to make. It does not end with signing an MOU after one conversation, but it starts with that conversation and recognizing something important, that as academics, we have things in common that cross international borders, and we want to talk to each other. This is something, I think you'll be surprised at how much US academics really want to meet their colleagues in other countries, particularly the ones they have not been operate that much in contact with. So that is one of the starting points. But doing all of the things that I've been saying, but start it with a single conversation. Anything else? I know we're coming up on the time here.
Well, with that in mind,
Yes.
for people who joined late or we didn't talk much about it, but these webinars are to give that introduction. But the second phase of this program is really to set up direct online trainings, modules that are led by US faculty for Algerian faculty. So a piece of these webinars, the questionnaire that we put into the chat, will drop in again now. We're suggesting some topics that would be good for discussion with US faculty over long term. The online webinars are designed to be 16 modules. So really a good 4 months of consistent coursework development. That can be on teaching capacity. I've spoken with several different people here or worked with different people around how do we help young people be workforce ready? How do we increase the use or support people as they're transitioning more towards using English? How do we create inclusive classrooms, teaching students of different levels, different languages, themes such as that. So I would like to we are going to definitely ask you to please fill out the questionnaire so that we can design those opportunities, because those will be times that you or others in your universities can really engage in intensive, long-term dialogue, training, capacity building. It's going to be both ways with the capacity building to make some enduring impacts. So we want to set those up for success. And I would love, before we put that in the chat, we usually take a nice selfie and say goodbye. If you do have any initial thoughts on themes that you would really like to see us touch on or arrange for those more in-depth training opportunities.
And I will drop the link again to the survey, and I will share it by email afterwards as well, just for those who can make it well.
Okay. Good. So I do see a hand raised here. Yeah. So Hakeem, it looks like you've raised your hand. Hakeem Agudan, did you mean to raise your hand?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you for thanking Ms. Bidat. I would like also to thank you, Ms. Susan, for the presentation. Also, don't forget Mr. Hamza to inviting us for this kind of meeting. Hakeem Agudan, I'm just a new member, an associate professor in chemical and process engineering. I'm a new member in the department, international department of our university, which is Ahmed Raya University from Adra University, situated in the south of Algeria, in the big Sahara. Yeah. I'm just wondering about if there is a partnership or there is universities which you have already a contract or collaboration in Algeria in this kind of program. Do we have already universities with a partnership in this program already in Algeria?
In engineering.
Thank you. Doesn't matter which field, so just if you have already universities collaborating with you as well. Thank you.
Well, I think, we certainly have, I know Dr. Professor Bukaru with his group have had many previous connections. We have connected with Adrar in the past to help with, that was especially for career development, done a lot of doctoral school development in Algiers, Annaba, Constantine, Oran. So we certainly have facilitated university partnerships in the past. So there's definitely have been partnerships. I know the US Embassy right now has set up a research partnership grant. I know that that's just, it's early days. So there are some existing partnerships there. This particular program will be looking at doing exactly that, setting up the university, especially faculty first, setting up those direct partnerships for groups of faculty to meet with faculty at American universities. It'll still be happening online, but one thing that we want to come out of that are action plans so that the Algerian universities who are participating can actually write proposals saying we would really like to receive an incoming professor So we would really like to hear really detailed plans from each university that then we can try to help find that funding and create something even longer and more enduring.
Thank you.
Leah, if I may ask, do you have, or probably are in the process, the specific target universities in Algeria, or is it pretty much open to everybody?
This one is open to anybody. This is really that it's much more writ large. Since these are online opportunities, what's good about that is that professors from different universities can connect, which, you know, as Susan was talking about, has opened up a whole nother level of cooperation. So once we fix our final 4 themes, then each one of those training themes, we're figuring 15 to 20 faculty members. So, you know, it could be from TZ, but
Different places.
yeah. What we want to be as an outcome of that is we do hope that then specific universities can put in proposals to then, you know, really bring in some American faculty that would really work directly with them on a more intensive basis. Yeah.
I think that's really great. And I from my perspective, I think we can contribute to,
Great.
you know, names of people. I think you need, in my opinion, people who are really going to be driving this kind of relationship, those who are open, available, and willing, you know. So I think that's from, we have people that we have collaborated with over the years. You know, the first project that was USAID funded, I did that in 2009 in Algeria, in Constantine, and there are people still there who are really open to this kind of thing. And I'm sure you've got lots of contacts since you've been there for a long time. I think that's going to be really a driving force, like the locomotive was, you know, if you're looking at 20 people among thousands, you need really 20 people who are going to really push.
Absolutely.
From the back, you know, this train, so to speak.
Yes.
And the other thing I want to mention is in terms of us here at FIU and across the US, as far as the Algerian-American Association we belong to, we have close to 100 faculty members spread across the United States.
Absolutely.
So if there is an interest in specific areas, specific universities, you know, that kind of thing, in addition to your contacts, you can also rely on us to help. Thank you.
And I saw Matt putting up his hand. Matt will be the one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to say thank you very much to Susan for the excellent presentation with so many different examples, and to encourage everybody to spend some more time looking at her slides, because there was much more information included there than we could possibly cover in this session. And then finally, I would like to point out that all of the examples that Susan provided, study abroad, research collaborations, centers of excellence, scholarships, exchanges, all of those will be included in the subsequent panel sessions that we're planning, meaning that individual universities will have a chance to present to Algerians their own examples from Susan's list of categories. And if you come to those sessions, you'll have a chance to learn in more detail what each of those models can look like in individual situations, and to think about ways that Algerian universities might want to adapt some of those models for your own unique purposes. So I encourage you to stay tuned and watch for those examples. And thank you very much, Susan, for the excellent presentation.
My pleasure. And good luck to all of you in pursuing this very exciting initiative.
Thank you so much. And just a quick note that I will be sharing the PowerPoint and the link to the recording with everyone. And I know a few people who weren't able to join us today were also requesting that material. And we'll also be following up with next steps on the upcoming webinars. And we hope to see you all again, and also other colleagues as well.
And so thank you all for coming. Please do take your time to give us some more feedback into the questionnaire, because that will really help us to organize the opportunities. And Lakhdar, thank you so much for your insights and the willingness to also help really push these towards the quality connections. Because like I said, I think it'll be just as enriching for the American participants as for the Algerians. So I think we'd like to thank everybody for coming.
Thank you very
Are we going
much.
to do any more last drops into the chat? And we'll just say, please leave us your feedback, leave us your feedback, leave us your feedback. And I think we hope, Susan, as well, we would love to include you in an in-person exchange in the future too.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
any last housekeeping, Hamza?
I think just share the word and bring your friends to the next opportunities. And send us your feedback as well.
Yeah, and so if you're registered for this one, we'll keep in touch. If there's any changes of dates, we'll communicate those. But we really look forward to these dialogues going on into the future.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. And then
Bye.
Bye.